today's edition of the Best of American Motorcycle Racing, we'll follow the stars of the AMA Outdoor Motocross Series as they crisscross the country, stopping off at some of the most challenging tracks in the U.S. What was at stake for these motorized gypsies? The prestigious 250 and 500cc motocross national titles. The riders that compete in these championships are acknowledged as the best in the world, and they have the credentials to prove it. The names read like a who's who in motocross. Rick Johnson, Jeff Ward, Ron Lachine, Jeff Stanton. Tonight on the Best of American Motorcycle Racing, outdoor motocross over natural terrain. From Florida to California to New York State. It's the 1988 AMA 250 and 500cc Outdoor National Motocross Championship. National Championship motocross event, only a handful of riders are expected to win. Of the 40 riders that start each moto, that handful is the cream of the crop. Usually, they are factory sponsored by one of the 4 major motorcycle manufacturing companies, like past national champion Johnny O'Mara from Simi Valley, California, who rides for Team Suzuki, or multi-time national champion Team Yamaha's Brock Glover from El Cajon, California, and his teammate from Sherwood, Michigan, Jeff Stanton. One of the standouts on Kawasaki's team is Ron Lachine, another Californian. And coming all the way from Australia is Jeff Leask, who rides for Team Honda. But of all the factory riders who are capable of winning on a given day, there are 2 that stand head and shoulders above the rest. First, Kawasaki's Jeff Ward from Mission Viejo, California, who has captured national championships in the 125cc class, the 250cc class, and a pair of titles in Stadium Supercross. Then there's his arch rival, Team Honda's Rick Johnson. In the past 4 seasons, Johnson has won 5 crowns, 1 in Supercross, 1 in 500cc competition, and 3 times the El Cajon, California native has won the 250cc crown. Heading into the 1988 season, those 2, the cream of the crop, were expected to once again contest the title. And from the drop of the gate at the opening round of the season, that's the way it went. In Gainesville, at the first 250cc national of the season, Team Honda's Rick Johnson won the opening moto, while Jeff Ward finished second. In moto number 2, the win went to Ward, while the best Johnson could do was finish third. Ward took the overall win, and with round 1 of the 6-event series completed, was on top of the standings by a slim 2-point margin. Next, the 2 are headed for Sacramento, California, at the Dirt Diggers North Motorcycle Club famed Hangtown. Team Honda's defending 250cc national champion, Rick Johnson, took over the series point lead by winning both motos. Jeff Ward, however, stayed well within reach of Johnson by finishing second twice. When we come back, we'll have exciting race footage from the remaining rounds of the 1988 250cc National Championship Series. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Best of American Motorcycle Racing. I'm Bruce Flanders, and this is Lake Sugar Tree in Axton, Virginia, site of round 3 of the 1988 250cc AMA Motocross Championship. With the first moto underway, most fans on hand expected a knockdown, drag-out battle between rider number 1, Team Honda's defending 250 champ Rick Johnson, and rider number 2, Kawasaki's Jeff Ward. Heading into the Lake Sugar Tree contest, the midway point of the 88 season, Ward, who was the 85 250 champ, trailed Johnson by a mere 4 points in the championship standings. The early lead in moto number 1 went to Brock Glover, number 44, with Ward, rider number 2, close behind. 2-time 250 champ Johnson, meanwhile, had suffered a dismal start and was well back in the pack. For Ward, the door was open. He needed to take the lead and put as much distance between himself and the rest of the pack as he possibly could. He knew Johnson was behind him, and he'd be charging hard to catch up. And that's exactly what Jeff Ward did. The Kawasaki rider passed Glover, and with no traffic to contend with, quickly opened a huge lead over the rest of the field. Johnson, meanwhile, was cutting and slashing his way through the pack. The defending national champion eventually moved all the way to the runner-up position. Unfortunately for RJ, Ward maintained his torrid pace and was gone. The Kawasaki rider took the checkered flag and moved within 1 point of Johnson in the championship chase. That set the stage for moto number 2. If Ward could duplicate his first moto performance, he would earn the overall win for the day. But more importantly, he would leave Axton, Virginia with the series points lead. In the second moto, number 24 Dennis Hawthorne had early visions of upsetting Ward's plan. Hawthorne was no match for the charged-up Ward. With valuable championship points on the line, Ward made the pass on Hawthorne look easy. Unlike the first moto, Ward was unable to put distance between he and the pack. Rick Johnson's second moto start was much better than in Moto 1, and the Honda Ace was soon camped on Ward's rear wheel. And that's when the fun began. First, Johnson passed Ward. Then Ward passed Johnson. Then it was Johnson's turn to again pass Ward. Unfortunately for the fans, there was to be no more passing on this day. Late in the race, Ward came back into view all by his lonesome. The Kawasaki rider from Mission Viejo, California, went on to take the win and a 24-point lead in the championship standing. For Johnson, the DNF meant the title chase was virtually over for him.
Rick, you and Jeff Ward were running neck and neck, swapping the lead back and forth. What happened out there?
Well, what happened was a water spigot came loose on the side of the cylinder. I lost all my water in my bike, and it got too hot and seized.
Rick, a DNF was probably the one thing that you really couldn't afford at this point. What does this do for the rest of the season?
Well, you know, it's a race. It's behind me now. I'm still upset about it, but there's nothing I can do. I'm going to go to win as much as I can, and if Jeff Ward has a problem, then it's in the cards for me to win the national championship. But if not, then there's always next year. But, you know, I don't feel he beat me.
Does this change your approach to your next race at all?
It motivates me a lot. But this was nothing I could prevent. I don't care if I was in the best shape of my life, if everything was going great. You know, it's just one of them things that happens. The spigots are glued in, and it just came loose, and I lost my water. You know, it happens.
Following the Lake Sugar Tree event, the 250 Championship Series was interrupted by a Supercross held in Giant Stadium. During that race, Jeff Ward landed wrong off of a jump. The result was a badly twisted and bruised ankle. For the next 2 weeks, Ward would get on his motorcycle only to race. His ankle was far too vulnerable to risk practicing, or for that matter, even training. At the events following the injury, Ward rode gingerly, and considering the injury, finished remarkably well. Ward's championship rival Rick Johnson was 100% and took advantage of Ward's uncompetitiveness at Mount Morris, Pennsylvania. Johnson won both motos, while Ward lost 13 championship points. In the first moto, riding on instinct and pure adrenaline, Ward managed a second-place finish. In the second moto, though, Ward's lack of training surfaced. The hot sun, the high humidity, combined to sap the Kawasaki rider's strength. The best Ward could do was sixth. The 250 title would be decided at the series finale in Texas.
The motocross action continues on ESPN's Best of American Motorcycle.
San Antonio, Texas was the site of the final and deciding round of the 88 250 National Championship. For Jeff Ward to have any chance at the title, he knew that he had to do better than his mediocre performance at Mount Morris.
Yeah, that's true. Last week, I rode really well the first moto. I felt if I was up front at the start, I could have ran with Ricky, but I can't be as aggressive as he can. If I passed him, he could get me right back pretty easily because he can be aggressive. I can't. I have to be kind of cautious in the certain turns, left-hand corners. And last week, the track circulated to the left. This week, it goes to the right. So I'm a little better here today.
What problems do you have with the ankle?
I have problems putting it down. I can't put it down. Last week, I put it down twice. I remember them both. Once I fell when I did. And I just keep it on the peg. I basically keep my feet on the pegs anyway, but it's just the type of thing where I can't go 100% to the corner and find out the berm's blown out and plant my foot and come back, so I'm kind of hesitant in that way.
There was nothing hesitant, though, about Jeff Ward's start. With the first moto underway, Ward, rider number 2, was among the leaders. Behind him, the only rider in the field that mathematically could challenge Ward for the crown.
Jeff Ward either has to get 2 fourths or in the first moto get a 6th. And it can happen, but on him getting the 2 fourths or a 6th in one moto, I have to win both motos. So you might say the pressure's more on me, but I know what it takes to win, and I'm just going to go out and give it all I got.
Johnson did just that, but so did Ward. At the end of the moto, Johnson claimed the checkered flag, while Ward settled for runner-up honors. The stage was set for the final moto of the series. Ward needed a 5th place or better to ensure the championship. The start was critical to Ward's chances, and he was beaten badly. Watch closely as Johnson, rider number 1, with a half a wheel on Ward, executes a perfect squeeze play. Ward had to back off the throttle or risk crashing. As a result, Ward ended up near the back of the pack. Johnson, meanwhile, was up front, chasing his El Cajon neighbor, Team Yamaha's Brock Glover. And with that move, Johnson took the lead and was in position to claim the crown. It was now up to Ward to respond. With the title on the line, Ward blocked out the pain from his battered ankle and carved his way through traffic. When the checkered flag fell, Ward clinched the title with a courageous runner-up finish. Just past the finish line, Rick Johnson waited. He was the first to offer congratulations to the champ. Ward displayed a lot of courage and tenacity by taking the title while nursing a painful injury. Congratulations, Jeff Ward, 1988 AMA 250 Motocross champion. Round 1 of the 500cc Outdoor Championship took place in Michigan. RJ and 250 champ Ward were the co-favorites. But there were, of course, other riders capable of winning the title. One of them took the lead at the start of the first moto of the series, number 4, Ron Lachine. Ward's Kawasaki teammate's lead was short-lived. On the backside of the track, Lachine committed an error and gave way to Ward. Chasing Ward was Jeff Leask, Australia's national champion. Once in the lead in moto number 1, Ward never relinquished it. He took the win with Leask finishing second, Ron Lachine third, and Rick Johnson fourth. In the second moto, a trio of riders provided the early action. Out in front was Jeff Stanton from nearby Sherwood, Michigan. Close behind was first moto winner Ward, followed by Johnson. The hard-charging trio set a blistering pace that everyone knew couldn't last. And everyone was right. The trio became a duo when Jeff Ward found himself on the ground. He was uninjured and quickly up, but the first moto winner had lost valuable time. Meanwhile, Ward's teammate Ron Lachine had moved out of the mainstream of riders to join the leaders. For the next few laps, this trio led the field, seemingly content with their respective positions. But then Johnson reached down and found something extra. The Honda Ace made his pass to take over the number 1 spot. From that point, Johnson never looked back. Ward ended up with third and overall winner of the day. Rick Johnson turned the tables at the next round in Binghamton, New York. Johnson swept both motos, while Ward suffered a flat tire and a DNF in Moto 1. Despite finishing second in Moto 2, Ward lost even more ground to Rick Johnson in the standings. Round 3 was in Delmont, Pennsylvania. With the first moto underway at the Steel City track, Ward knew his chances of winning the title were slim. Among the riders still in contention was early moto leader, Team Yamaha's Jeff Stanton. Heading into round 3, Stanton trailed Johnson by 17 points. He needed to beat Johnson to close the gap. Stanton was doing just that until he stalled his engine. Johnson made the pass and was gone. The El Cajon, California rider took his 4th moto win in a row. Moto number 2, and the best action of the day. Number 2, Rick Johnson pulled the whole shot, while Ron Lachine, runner-up to RJ in Moto 1, was barely inside the top 10. Lachine, though, was on the gas and quickly moved to second place. Lachine hounded Johnson, waiting for a mistake. It came out of camera sight on the bottom part of the track. When the lead pair came back into view, Lachine was the leader. For several laps, Lachine led the way, then Johnson regained the upper hand. But watch this. Lachine comes right back. Through the years, this pair of riders, both from El Cajon, California, have engaged in classic motocross battles from one end of the country to the other. None of them, though, better than this one. Johnson waited just a few corners to make his move, and just like that, the Honda rider regained control of the lead. And this time, he made it stick. From that point, Johnson went on to claim his 2nd moto win of the day and pad his already substantial points lead. Of the 1988 500cc Motocross National Championship Series, defending champion Team Honda's Rick Johnson was on top of the championship standings by 27 points. Behind him were a host of riders, hoping for a Johnson error that would catapult them into contention. At the 4th round in Troy, Ohio, Ron Lachine, rider number 4, took the lead on the opening lap and left the rest of the field in his roost. Lachine would emerge as Johnson's number 1 adversary for the remainder of the season. With Lachine out front, Johnson settled into second place. It was unlike the Honda rider to sit on a points lead and not go for the win. The first moto ended with Lachine the winner, Johnson second, Jeff Leask third, and Jeff Stanton fourth. The points deficit between Lachine and series leader Johnson was cut by 3. In the second moto, Jeff Leask, number 7, was the early leader, followed by Kawasaki's of Mike Fisher and Jeff Ward. When Fisher was temporarily hung up in the mud, Ward moved into second and set out in pursuit of Leask. He quickly caught him, but before he could make the pass, he was joined by Lachine. When the trio of riders reappeared, Lachine was out front and was easily pulling away. Ward would hang back to try and keep Johnson out of second. His efforts, though, were not needed, as Johnson was unable to climb any higher than fifth, and that's the way the moto ended. When Lachine crossed the finish line with his second moto win of the day, he'd gained another 9 points on Johnson. The question was, with 2 rounds remaining, could Lachine continue to close up the points gap on Rick Johnson?
Well, I don't know. I was really pumped up today. You know, I really felt well, and you know, my bike worked real well also. So I think it was just a little bit of everything. I felt real well. I came into this race knowing what I had to do, and I did it.
Heading into the next to the last round, only 15 points separated Johnson and Lachine in the chase for the 500cc crown. Mathematically, several other riders were still in contention, but based on Lachine's Troy, Ohio performance and Johnson's winning record, it was expected that the two of them would decide the championship. The early going of Moto number 1 was all Ron Lachine. The Kawasaki ace took the early lead and stretched it on every lap. Johnson, though, apparently was just warming up. The defending champ shifted into high gear and quickly closed the gap. As the pair of title contenders disappeared, the race for the number 1 position was on. When they reappeared, it was Johnson in front. The Team Honda rider went on to take the moto win and boost his points lead to 18 over Lachine, who finished second. In Moto number 2, a tough Rick Johnson got even tougher. Jeff Ward held the lead in the early laps, followed by Jeff Stanton, number 8, and in third, Rick Johnson. The trio of riders hung together for several laps, never more than a few bike lengths apart. The first to succumb to the pressure was Ward. That left Stanton and Johnson to fight it out. The fight lasted just a few more laps. Then Johnson was all alone out in front. For all practical purposes, round 5 of the series was over. Johnson, with a pair of moto wins, stretched his standings lead over Lachine by 23 points. The 500cc national title would be decided at the series finale in Washougal, Washington.
There's more Best of American Motorcycle Racing on ESPN coming up after these short messages.
500cc Motocross National Championship was decided at Washougal, Washington, in the last event of a 6-race series. Heading into the final pair of motos, 2 riders remained in the hunt for the title. The challenger for Team Kawasaki, Ron Lachine, and the defending champion, Team Honda's Rick Johnson. Johnson, with a 23-point lead, needed only to coast through the pair of motos, and the title would be his. Lachine, on the other hand, needed maximum points. Surprisingly, the 2 riders shared the same plan of attack for the upcoming race.
Well, I'll basically be attacking today. You know, it's going to take a pretty big mess up on Ricky's part for me to overtake the championship, and I'm just going to be out there doing my best and hoping for the worst. Like you say, I have a 23-point lead, and we've done some. It doesn't take much figuring to do, but if I go out and win the first moto, I'll wrap the series. So that's what I'm trying for, because you never know what can happen.
What happened in the opening lap of Moto number 1 was just what the crowd on hand paid to see. The top riders in the U.S. were running 1, 2, 3. Jeff Ward was the leader, followed by his teammate and title hopeful Ron Lachine. Right behind the pair of Kawasaki's was the Honda Series points leader, Rick Johnson. As the trio of front runners headed towards the back part of the Washougal track, all that were watching knew what to expect. Jeff Ward would give way to his teammate Lachine and would try to hold back the charging Johnson by slowing the pace. If Ward could do that, then Lachine would build a lead, and the rest of the pack would be in position to affect Johnson's performance. Short of blatantly knocking Johnson down, it was the most a teammate could do. As the riders came back into view, the scenario was underway. Lachine was the leader. Johnson, though, had no intention of falling into the Kawasaki trap. He went to the outside of Ward to make the pass. It almost worked, but Ward, with a handful of throttle, held Johnson off. They went out of sight within a few feet of each other. When they reappeared on the rough Washougal track, Lachine was still in control, but Johnson, with the title on the line, had worked into second. Lap after lap, the 2 riders held their positions. Johnson would close, then Lachine would open a gap. As the moto neared the final laps, it appeared Lachine was well in control of the situation. If he held on for the win, the title would not be decided until Moto number 2. Lachine's hopes would still be alive. Then, in the closing stages, Johnson showed the heart of a true champion. He moved to Lachine's rear wheel and hounded the Kawasaki hopeful. He wanted to force Lachine into making an error, and he did. On the backside of the track, the series points leader took over the number 1 spot. Lachine gave chase, but Johnson, after coming from off the pace to take the lead, was not about to hand it back. The championship was within his grasp, and the Honda rider knew it. All that remained was to keep his motorcycle upright. If he did that, Johnson would claim the national championship for the second consecutive year. As he neared the finish line on the final lap, Johnson knew that victory was his. With arms raised high in the air, Rick Johnson took the checkered flag and the 500cc crown. A few minutes later, he had this to say.
Thank God it's over. Now I don't have to do anything in the second race but go out and have a good time, and it feels good to wrap it up with one race to go.
With the championship wrapped up, Moto number 2 at Washougal was only for bragging rights and pocket change. And when it was over, Jeff Ward, one of the preseason favorites, did all the bragging. You'll recall early in the season, Ward recorded 1 DNF. For the rest of the series, Ward played team tactics, often sacrificing his up-front position to further his teammates' cause. But when Johnson wrapped up the title in Moto number 1, the gloves came off for number 2. Lachine chased Ward in the early going, but was not able to match the torrid pace set by the Kawasaki team captain. Lachine matched his first moto performance with another second place. Johnson, meanwhile, was never in the hunt. When the checkered flag fell on Moto number 2, the newly crowned champ was third. On the final lap, Jim Hawley pulled alongside Johnson and offered this salute. At Washougal, Jeff Ward definitely won the last battle. But Rick Johnson won the whole war. Lachine finished second, while Yamaha's Jeff Stanton finished third. Jeff Leese, the Australian, finished fourth, and Jeff Ward, the 1988 250 champ, rounded out the top 5. Looking back at the 1988 250 and 500 championships, you have to acknowledge both Rick Johnson and Jeff Ward for their outstanding performances. For Ward, he showed the courage of an athlete who plays hurt. Despite his painful ankle injury, the diminutive rider did what he had to do to take the 250 title. For Johnson, well, he's right. No one can keep up with him. RJ did put in some lackluster performances, but when it counted, the magic man of motocross solidified his stature as the best in the world. Although Jeff Ward supporters would certainly take exception to that ranking. For the best of American motorcycle racing, I'm Bruce Flanders.